Ladies and gentlemen, we are here. Greetings and salutations. E. Spencer Kyte. One question for every fight, and this time is for UFC 285. Takes place this Saturday at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, headlined by a fight for the vacant heavyweight UFC title between Jon Jones and Ciryl Gane. Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso battle for the flyweight title in the co-main event. This is the best card of the year. By far, hands down, top to bottom, an assortment of amazing matchups with a lot of intriguing questions. And we're going to go through them fight by fight, one question for each fight. And we're starting, as we always do, with the main event, the most compelling fight on the UFC calendar to date, Jon Jones and Ciryl Gane. My question is, what the hell are we going to get from Jon Jones? So I have a story coming out today, or is out now today, on OSDB Sports, addressing all of the myriad questions that I have about the returning Jon Jones. Some of them include, what's he going to look like after 3 years away? What's he going to look like at heavyweight? How does he contend with a fighter like Gane, who neutralizes and nullifies some of those massive advantages that he carried at light heavyweight in terms of the length and the height and the ability to utilize those things? And what's he going to do? How's he going to react when someone the size of Gane hits him with a body kick or hits him with a clean right hand? The thing that fascinates me about this fight and that has me so fired up already here on Wednesday about this fight that is still several sleeps away is that none of these things can be answered. We can speculate. We can give our opinions. We certainly will on the preview show. I will hear throughout the week. But we won't know until these two men make the walk and stand opposite one another. And whoever is refereeing says, fight, and they get after it. We don't know how Jon Jones is going to respond to getting hit by a heavyweight. We don't know if he's going to be able to wrestle the way that he did at light heavyweight. We don't even know what he's going to look like physically, fully in there in terms of the way he moves, the dynamics, the mechanics of his body, which were such important facets of his light heavyweight reign. In a skill for skill, talent for talent evaluation, Jon Jones is one of the greatest performers we have ever seen step foot in the octagon. He might be the very best in terms of putting everything together in terms of talent, the raw materials, the fight IQ, the ability to implement and execute game plans, all of those things. But heavyweight is a different animal because at heavyweight, sometimes that stuff doesn't matter. Sometimes the other guy just hits harder than you do or hits really goddamn hard, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? Alistair Overeem may have had a wonderful game plan and on paper is the more technical, more seasoned, more skilled fighter than Francis Ngannou. But they stood in there and got into an exchange, and Francis Ngannou landed first and landed heavier, and it sent Alistair Overeem's head out into orbit. I believe it just landed like 3 weeks ago. That may be what happens to Jon Jones here. Like that could be, and I don't mean that he's going to get knocked out in that kind of vicious fashion, though that is entirely possible. But it could just be a situation where all of those advantages, all of those strengths that he had at light heavyweight that he was able to deploy against guys that came in relatively same sized as him in terms of physical weight, stature, all of those things, where he's able to utilize that 84-inch reach. He's able to utilize the really long legs, and there's such a great advantage. Some of that may be gone. And now he's facing people that can put him out with one shot. In theory, we don't even know that. Maybe Jon Jones has a great chin. Who knows? Who knows? After 3 years away, that's a ton of rust. Does he come in and shake it right off? Were the last couple of fights, Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes, he has said all the right things about not being motivated. And you can understand logically, I can sit here and understand that argument. You go through the murderer's row of former champions and superstars and prime contenders that Jon went through in Alexander Gustafsson and then Daniel Cormier and then Gus again and Cormier again and all these different great competitors to then get to Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, Dominic Reyes, that you feel you are orders of magnitude better than. And so the motivation isn't there. I can understand it logically, 100%. We talk about it all the time, that staying on top is a very difficult proposition, because for you, it's trying to get up again and again and again for this thing, in John's case, that he's done so many times. Whereas for Dominic Reyes, it's the first time he's fought for championship gold, and it is everything. The same for Thiago Santos, the same for Anthony Smith. And John just didn't have that same kind of fire. I can buy that. I can believe it. I can understand it. It may also just be that the pack was starting to close the gap on him, and that the years of competing and the years of life outside of the cage were starting to get to John. We're starting to catch up and creating instances where a guy like Thiago Santos can nearly secure a victory, or a guy like Dominic Reyes, in my opinion, can do enough to merit a victory. We're going to find out the answers to these things the only way we can, and that's by these two men getting in there on Saturday night and determining who is the new UFC heavyweight champion. We can have all the discussions after this event about the lineal champion, the legacy of the title, whether this person is the rightful champion, all of that stuff. We can have all those discussions. I'm sure Sean and Graham will talk about it on the big show. Harry and I will certainly touch on it on the takeaways on Tuesday. But for right now, the thing in my mind, the number one question is just, what the hell are we going to get from Jon Jones? And the easy, simple, straightforward answer is, we won't know until Saturday. And that fascinates me. We move to the co-main event. Flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko defends her title against Alexa Grasso. My question is, was UFC 275 a bump in the road or something more for Shevchenko? A little bit similar to John in his last couple of fights. Was the fight with Taila Santos a situation where Valentina Shevchenko just had an off night? Just wasn't quite firing the way that we're used to her firing. And Taila Santos came in and was locked in, ready to go, had her best night on Valentina's not great night, and damn near got a victory. Could certainly be the case. Could also be, much like I was saying with Jon Jones, that the pack is starting to catch up to Val. She'll be 35 next week. She's been champion. She's defended the title 7 times already. It's more than all of the current male champions combined. It is only 2 less than all of the other champions combined in total. And it's just hard to constantly get up for that, right? It's hard to constantly get up for the next challenge, especially when you're as good as these champions, these athletes are at times. Because on paper, and I say this with all due respect to Alexa Grasso, on paper, if Valentina Shevchenko is who we have always known her to be, set aside UFC 275. If she is who we have known her to be previous to that, she steamrolls Alexa Grasso on Saturday and eliminates all of this talk. Just silences all of it, deadens all of it. Which is why it's important to see this fight. Because it's only in the actual testing of these theories and an application of these hypotheses that we figure out what the truth is. That's how we get results, right? Experiments and results. That's what this is. My brain tells me that Shevchenko just had an off night. Of all the people, when we talk about champions at some point are going to slip and it's inevitable and all of those things, she is the one, to me, that stands out as the potential outlier in that. Because this has been her life since she was a little girl. This is everything about her life is built around this. And while there are secondary things, they're all really connected to what she does. So training and competing is the primary focus always. Herself, her coach, her sister, they travel. They go to different places to train in different locales. They shoot guns. They eat good food, those sorts of things. But it's all built around the preparation and the training. She's not in, as much as she should be in, the last Bond movie or the upcoming, 17th Fast and Furious movie, because she has that international woman of mystery, super spy. Everything about her fits perfectly for that. She's not doing any of that stuff because she just wants to train and be the best female fighter on the planet, be one of the best fighters on the planet, full stop. And so if anybody's going to escape the champions eventually step on a banana peel, I do think she is the one that could get there. But maybe not. Maybe not, right? Alexa Grasso may be able to come in here and do some stuff, and Val's taken just even a half step back from where she was previously. If Taila Santos was something more, maybe there's another half step back. If that was a half step, we get another half step here, then the gap is narrowed. And fighters like Grasso, or this emerging group of women in this division, led by Erin Blanchfield, is starting to get to that point where they're coming for Shevchenko. And the idea of her being a colossal favorite has to be changed. We have to rethink how we think about her at the top of this division. Again, much like the main event, I am utterly fascinated by this fight and this question, because we don't know for sure, and we won't know for sure until Saturday night and how this fight plays out. Move to the welterweight division, Jeff Neal versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. My question simply is, how good is Shavkat Rakhmonov right now? And I don't mean that in a like, hey bro, how good is Rakhmonov? I mean it in like, is this guy a championship contender right now? Is he still an ascending contender in waiting that needs some of these bigger tests? We're going to find out. Jeff Neal is the right step up in competition from the win over Neil Magny. Everything we've seen thus far, even though there are not mistakes or holes, but just little pieces that Rakhmonov can always work on and always tighten up, he's looked terrific. It's hard to knock a guy that's 4-0 in the UFC with 4 straight finishes and 16-0 overall, finishing all of those fights. It's hard to sit here and pick at him. It's why he is an overwhelming favorite going into this. But I do think this fight presents a bunch of challenges and questions that are going to tell us whether Rakhmonov is a guy that should be in a position to challenge for championship gold by the end of the year, win this one, face a top 5 guy, win that one, in line for a title shot, or whether this is going to be the fight where he finally takes that loss, finally takes that little half step back and has to reset, almost similar to Sean Brady losing to Bilal Muhammad. Now, Sean Brady hasn't come back yet. We haven't seen it, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But it could have that kind of effect. I think people still kind of underrate Jeff Neal a little bit because he had those 2 losses. He wasn't expected to go out and beat Vicente Luque the way that he did, but he did that. He presents some interesting challenges. He is a southpaw, hits hard, tough game, gritty, been through some stuff, looked good his last couple fights. This is going to be a tough test. But if you go out, if you're Rakhmonov and he goes out and beats Jeff Neal handily and picks up a 5th straight win and a 5th straight stoppage in the UFC, runs it to 17-0, all finishes, he's got to get a top 5 guy next. And we have to start talking about him sort of in that same way that we did Islam Makhachev when he was on the way up, when he was beating guys of this nature. And we were thinking, well, how good is he? Because we haven't seen him in there with the best of the best yet. Islam has proven that he is the best lightweight in the world. We're going to find out over these next 12 to 18 months just how good Shavkat Rakhmonov is. Move to the lightweight division, Mateusz Gamrot versus Jalen Turner. My question is, can Turner take a big step forward? This is a huge step up from Jalen Turner. And I say that having a lot of respect for Brad Riddell, his last opponent. Gamrot's a different level. This was supposed to be Dan Hooker, which felt like the right sort of natural progression. And it would have been cool because it would have been 3 straight people from the Oceanic region, right? He beat Jamie Malarkey, he beats Brad Riddell, then he faces Riddell's teammate Dan Hooker. comes in looking for vengeance, is a veteran guy, all of that stuff. Dan got hurt, broke his hand. Heal up, my guy. We'll see you soon, hopefully. And Gamrot stepped up, and this is a bigger fight. This is a more dangerous fight. This is a more competitive fight. This, truthfully, is a more dangerous, it's a worse fight for Jalen Turner on paper. Because Gamer is a different level even than Dan Hooker is. Yes, he's coming off a loss to Beneil Dariush. It was a good fight. It was a competitive fight. Dariush is the number one contender in this division. Before that, he won a 5-round fight of the year caliber fight against Arman Saryukin, who is absolutely no joke. This is a very dangerous fight for Jalen Turner. And I am so curious to find out if this kid that has looked so good over these last 5 fights, slowly putting it together, figuring out how to use that colossal reach advantage and that obvious power that he has, and flash and use those keen finishing instincts, can go out there and beat a guy that a lot of people don't think he can beat. Right? The Dan Hooker fight, probably going to be a bit of a coin flip. I would have expected Jalen Turner to be the underdog, but not by a lot. I expect Mateusz Gamrot to be a reasonable favorite by the time we close sort of Friday, Saturday, when Ian and I do the picks and plays, and then when we get into the cage on Saturday. I expect Jalen Turner to be a considerable underdog, like plus 200 or more. Gamer is that good, that respected. But Jalen Turner has big power. He's got a huge, huge natural physical advantage in terms of his height and his reach, and he's figuring out how to use that. And this feels like one of those fights where it just might be Jalen Turner's time. This just might be a fighter that's been around for a lot longer than you think he has because he's 27. And he just takes that next step. And he just beats a really well-respected, well-traveled, well-seasoned, accomplished dude like Gamrot. It's a great fight. Can't wait for this fight. Main card opener, Bo Nickel versus Jamie Pickett in the middleweight division. My question is, what's reasonable to expect of Bo Nickel this year? So, when he gets his contract officially, after winning his second fight on the Contender Series last fall, some people said all kinds of crazy stuff about Bo Nickel. He could beat a top 5 opponent right now. He's the best wrestler in the UFC. All kinds of wildness, right? Get him in there. He could beat Izzy right now. I mean, you're entitled to whatever opinion and idea and thoughts you want. That's fine. Have them. By all means, if you're right, I will give you your golf claps. I will offer my apologies for not thinking the same way and for dismissing your ideas as crazy talk. Because here's the thing. He's looked amazing, but he's looked amazing against scrubs. He's 3-0. It's 3 first-round finishes against scrubs. The first one's a weekend warrior. The second 2 are hand-picked opponents for him to look really good against. And as much as I like Jamie Pickett as a human being, having talked to him a couple of different times, he's a warm body in here on Saturday night. He's 2-4 in the UFC. He's lost his last 2, both by stoppage. The last one to Dennis Tululin. The one before that to Kyle Dawkins. Those 2 gentlemen are not currently employed by the UFC as far as I know. This is a setup for Bo Nickel to look great, and I expect him to look great. I expect him to move to 4-0 with 4 first-round finishes. I don't think he has much trouble with Jamie Pickett, but that doesn't tell me anything because Bo Nickel, with his pedigree alone, should be able to dominate the Jamie Picketts of the world. But what I want to find out is as we start moving up the ranks, as we start getting into more experienced, more accomplished, more well-rounded opponents, how does Bo Nickel respond? Because one of the things that I think maybe doesn't get mentioned enough or talked about enough in talking about Bo Nickel is that he's 27. This is a thing that Sean talks about all the time with Paddy Pimblett, right? Because Paddy has a little bit of that aura of, young emerging prospect. Paddy is 27 and has all kinds of fights. We sort of know who he is. Bo Nickel doesn't have the fights, but he's 27. So the years here of he's got 3-4 years to kind of work his way through may not be the case. He's been wrestling since he was a tyke. He's been wrestling at a high level since he was in high school. As much as it's not mileage like there is in terms of UFC and MMA and beatings of that nature, it's still years of weight cuts. It's still years of physical altercation, of combat sports, that we don't know how long his body's going to hold up. We don't know any of these things. And so while I understand shooting the moon in terms of expectations and projections for him, I just want to see it. I want to see what he looks like as he moves forward after this. To me, if he can work to a position where he's 3-0 in the UFC and he's beaten somebody in that 20 to 30 range in the division, maybe even 15 to 25, that's a really great year. I would be impressed with that. I would be surprised by that. And I would really be looking forward to his sophomore year if that's how this plays out. But I don't know if that's possible. We're going to start finding out on Saturday. Bo Nickal's fascinating to me. I know I've used that word a lot already on this show. This card is amazing. There's so much that intrigues me about it. Bo Nickal's right up near the top of the list of athletes I want to see compete this year, because I just have so many questions and there's so much unknown with him because he is so young in his career in this sport, but so accomplished coming over from wrestling. That's just the main card. How good is that main card? Move to the prelims. Cody Garbrandt returns to bantamweight to face Trevin Jones. And my question is, has there been a sharper fall than Cody Garbrandt's decline? So No Love turns 32 in July. He's lost 2 straight. He's lost 5 of his last 6 since that win over Dominic Cruz. Since he claimed the bantamweight title, he is 1-5. And yes, people will quickly say, yeah, but those TJ fights, TJ's on gear. Got to throw those out. Probably. Maybe. Even if you throw them out, it's still 1-3 over his last 4. Getting knocked out by Pedro Munoz, getting knocked out by Kai Kara France, getting jabbed apart by Rob Font, and even the win over Rafael Assunção. It was a really competitive fight until Cody swung from his shoelaces and caught Assunção coming in. He went from that win over Dominic Cruz. And I was talking to my guy, Danny Austin, about this a couple of weeks ago, and it still remains true, and it will hold true for the rest of my life. That win over Dominic Cruz is one of the single best performances I have seen in my life. I was just aghast that someone could go out there and do that to Dominic Cruz, the guy that does that to everybody. And so for him to be at this point where this fight with Trevin Jones, to me, is a coin flip after that, is wild. It's wild. There have been other people that have fallen off, right? Johnny Hendricks comes to mind pretty quickly. A lot of people point to the advent or the introduction of USADA into some of the big rig struggles. Not here to point fingers, not here to make accusations, just saying that's a theory that is out there. And look, there's injuries, there's damage. It's just wild to me. It's wild to me that this is where Cody Garbrandt is at. He seemed on the cusp of being one of the pillars of this promotion for years to come with that victory when he claimed the bantamweight title. And since then, he's got 1 win in 6 appearances and is in a coin flip fight with Trevin Jones, who has struggled to have success in the UFC thus far. If he loses this one, That might be it. That, like, not that he's done and can never fight again and is going to get cut or anything like that. I don't ever want to speculate about those things, but like, if you don't beat Trevin Jones, there's not a whole lot of guys below Trevin Jones that you can go out and fight. And I don't say that to disparage Trevin Jones. That's just how the division lines up and what and where we're at. Like, he tried the I'm going to move to flyweight thing, and Kai Kara France knocked him out. It's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. Because if Cody Garbrandt can't win this one, I don't know what he does next. And this is a competitive fight. Because he's tried to do all of the reinvent, rediscover, change gyms, different looks, different things. Applaud him for all of that. If you can't get this one, where do you go? What do you do? And that night against Cruz just continues to become more of a one night this thing happened kind of performance. It's wild to me. Moving on to the middleweight division, Derek Brunson versus Dricus du Plessis. My question is, can du Plessis keep plowing ahead at middleweight? I'm really fascinated by the South African, who is 18-2 overall, 4-0 in the UFC, 3 finishes, 1 decision. Kind of gutsy. He can crack a little bit. He can wrestle a little bit, but he also seems like a guy that's just limited. Like, he seems like one of those guys that if he ends up in the top 5, you'll be like, really? That guy? And I know that we joke all the time about middleweight and the lack of talent and things like that, but like, I watch him fight, and I watch that fight with Darren Till where after 5 minutes, he looks exhausted. And just even the mechanics of him always look a little bit stiff and robotic and herky, but he's having success. He's got a knockout win over Roberto Soldic, who we all agree on this platform at least is a absolute monster that we wish was in the UFC, but best of luck to him in one championship. I know he had another fight announced. Look forward to seeing that after the unfortunate incidents in his debut. But like, this is a good fight. This is the litmus test for Still Knox. Because for a long, long time, Derek Brunson has been the measuring stick for contenders. He's the guy you beat. And if you beat him, you're into actual title contention. I don't know if he's still there at this stage because he hasn't fought since the fight with Jared Cannonier. He had a couple fights fall through, but before that, he was on a good run. And he was that guy. Like, if you're the real deal in middleweight, you go out and you got to beat Derek Brunson. And if du Plessis does, then he's moving forward. And he's landing opposite one of these even more established names in terms of contenders, like Sean Strickland, maybe even a Robert Whittaker, maybe the winner of Marvin Vettori, Roman Dolidze, something like that. Like, there's only a limited number of people ahead of Derek Brunson in the pecking order. And so I'll be fascinated to see if du Plessis, who just, as I said, doesn't look the part to me, but is getting the results, can go out and get another result on Saturday. Flyweight division, Viviane Araujo against Amanda Ribas. The question is whether Ribas is a contender, an actual contender at flyweight. I really wish we got that Tracy Cortez fight late last year. Fell apart for undisclosed medical reasons. As of right now, Cortez has said she will, in due time, discuss what happened. Hasn't done that yet, to the best of my knowledge. But this is a bigger test for Amanda Ribas. It really is the one that is going to tell us, emphatically, at least for now, whether she is ready to be a contender and yet another contender in this division. Because the last person that beat Viviane Araujo is fighting for the flyweight title this evening, on Saturday evening, Alexa Grasso. Every fighter that has beaten her in the UFC, and there's only 3, have fought for championship gold, either relatively soon after Grasso and Jessica Ai, or at some point before Caitlin Chukagian. So that's what's at stake here for Amanda Ribas, who I think we all agree is a good talent, has shown flashes of being a potential contender, no matter what division she's in. I was impressed with her performance against Caitlin Chukagian last year. But this also sort of feels a little bit like a got to make a move year for Amanda Ribas. She will be 30 later this summer. She hasn't won a fight like this yet. And so this is the one that if you are a contender, if you are somebody we need to think about in that ascending pack, you got to win this one. Because she's had these opportunities twice before, the Chukagian fight and the Marina Rodriguez fight at the start of 2021. And she didn't get either of those victories. And so now we sit and we reset again and we get another opportunity, and hopefully everything progresses properly. Everybody makes weight. Everybody stays healthy. We get this fight on Saturday night and we get to see if the absolutely affable, infectious Brazilian can beat the woman that is essentially the gatekeeper to championship contention in the flyweight division. We move back to middleweight for Julian Marquez and Marc-Andre Barriault. My question is, which of these two middling middleweights will get things moving in the right direction? For me, this is the only fight on the UFC 285 lineup that is just sort of a fight. There's not a lot of big stakes. There's not a lot of questions that I have about either of these men in terms of where they go from here or what comes next. Because they're two guys coming off a loss. They're both sort of established mid-pack fighters at 85. We know where they stand. We know who they are. So this is just a fight. And that's perfectly fine because every fight card needs a couple just a fight matchups. But I will be interested to see because, as I said, each has shown a little bit here and there, but there hasn't been the consistency of results for either of them. I feel like and have always felt like the UFC sees more in Julian Marquez than I do. And I think more has been made or expected of Marc-Andre Barriault than maybe is there because of the double champ status at TKO. There's always room to move at middleweight. We talk about this pretty well every card, that if you can string together 2, 3, 4 wins in this mid pack, you can work your way forward. But I don't think either of these guys is actually truly capable of having that kind of consistency. Now, maybe one of them starts to prove me wrong on Saturday, but I don't think that's going to be the case. My hope is that we get a competitive, entertaining fight towards the middle of the preliminary cards, and we just figure out which one of them moves forward with a victory into the second half of the year. Into the welterweight division for Ian Machado Gary versus Song Kenan. My question is, when are we going to see the Ian Gary breakout? I know that sounds like a bit of an asshole question, but Ian Gary is 3-0 in the UFC. He's 10-0 overall, but it feels to me like his momentum has waned almost a lot, because as much as he had good wins last year against Darian Weeks and Gabe Green, they are decision wins where, and we said at the time, and I stand by it, he's just gaining that experience, and that's perfectly fine. But he comes in now and it's another guy in that tier. Song Kenan hasn't fought in 2 years. He's coming off a first round knockout loss to Max Griffin. This to me should be another layup for Ian Gary. And while I don't want to rush him because he's only 25, I'm kind of at that I was expecting more than this by now point of things. And he came out and said, when Brian Barberina was trying to coax him into a fight or negotiate a fight between the two of them on Twitter, that, hey, I wanted to fight Bam Bam. You know it, but this is what they gave me. This is the contract you signed. This is what was offered, and you went, yep, sure, I'm in. And fine. I'm happy to see you back. I'm just happy to see you competing. But it's getting to that point for me where I need to see that step forward. I need to see that advancement. I need a performance where I go, okay, that's right. That's why we were so hyped. That's why we were so interested coming off Cage Warriors and even coming off the win at Madison Square Garden in his debut against Jordan Williams. all for logging those 2 15-minute fights last year. Gain that experience, work on some of the things you've been working on in the gym, put it into application in the cage. Great. Come out and show me something on Saturday. Come out and make a little bit of a statement and remind people why there was so much buzz, why you should still be considered one of the best rising stars on the roster and somebody that is going to be a problem and a championship factor in this division going forward. Because if this is another 15-minute decision where it's just Ian Garry working on things, that buzz goes away. And suddenly we're having to rebuild it. And you go from being the kid that everybody wanted to see, that had all of this momentum behind him, to fights like this, where people go, oh yeah, Ian Garry's fighting. It shouldn't be, oh yeah, Ian Garry's fighting. So come out and show us something on Saturday. Move to the bantamweight division. Cameron Saaiman versus Mana Martinez. My question is, should Saaiman be considered one of the top prospects in the UFC? I'm honestly sitting here questioning whether I should have included him in my list of top prospects that I put out on OSDB Sports earlier this year, because at 22 years old, the poise and command and focus this young man exhibits and showed when we spoke earlier this week, and the interview that is up here on the SevereMMA YouTube page already, please go check that out. I think he probably should be on that list because he is 22 and he's 7-0 and he's 1-0 in the UFC. And it was a good win in a fight where he could have, as we talked about, just kind of bailed and lost focus and gotten down on himself and in on himself and struggled. Instead, he just stayed poised. He stayed focused, and he went out and he got the third round finish to make sure that the point deduction didn't cost him, to make sure that he didn't end up in a spot where he just gets a draw because he made a mistake. He's really impressive. I'm really impressed with this kid so far, both in terms of the effort we've seen and what he showed me when we spoke for that interview. Martinez is another solid test. It's a matchup against the guy that can bang a little bit, that can swing a little bit, hits hard, durable, tough to get out of there, as we saw in the Ronnie Lawrence fight. But it's a winnable fight, and it's a fight where if Cameron Saaiman is somebody that is to be part of this ascending group at bantamweight that continues to grow, and this wave of young talent across the UFC that continues to rise, he'll go out there, as he said on Saturday, and make a statement and have that big performance where everybody has to sit up and take notice. I love that he understands that a fight with Raul Rojas Jr. at this point doesn't make sense. I love that he's looking to the future for that fight and puts himself in that position of, he and I are the future of the division. Our paths will cross eventually. I want to see if he can keep working towards that on Saturday. And if he makes me regret not including him in that list earlier this year. Move to the strawweight division. Jessica Penne against Tabitha Ricci. My question is, where does Ricci fit in this division? So she's 2-0 at 115 after losing her debut up at flyweight against Manon Fiorot. We throw that one out. It doesn't count. It's two good decisions, good grappling, but not a lot of damage, not a lot of advancing and punishing opponents. Penne is a very good test as a former title challenger, as a, veteran of this sport who has been around, been through everything, can do a little bit of everything in there. And this feels a little bit similar to when Penne fought Lupi Godinez, and it was a close fight, a competitive fight. It showed us the level of where Lupi is at right now. And that's why I'm interested in this fight for Tabitha Ricci, because she's dominated these last two fights, but they're against Maria Oliveira and Poliana Viana, two women that she can put on the ground, keep on the ground, and that's it, right? Two fighters with poor takedown defense and limited upside. Penne's a little older. She's past the prime, certainly in her 40s now, but has shown in these last couple of years that she's still got something. She can still be a bad night for you at the office, and she can still catch you if you make mistakes. So this is the fight where Tabitha Ricci really sort of shows, okay, I'm beyond this lower tier. I'm at least in this mid pack, and maybe I deserve to be up in this forward pack. Go out and get a win here, and you're maybe starting to scratch at the bottom of the top 15. You're maybe starting to angle for some of those bigger names, more established names, or even just another emerging name like Luana Pinheiro or Emily Ducote or someone of that nature. But you got to get through Jessica Penne first. And this is a good test, and I look forward to it. Next up, we have Damone Blackshear versus Farid Basharat. My question is, can Farid Basharat follow in his brother's footsteps? So I've had the pleasure of speaking with Farid's older brother, Javid, before each of his first couple of UFC fights. And every time we do, he talks about, look, my brother's coming and I got to put distance between us because he can't have more wins in the UFC than me. He can't look to be better than me in the UFC. So Javid is 3-0 and he's looked good. And so here comes baby bro, 25 years old, 9-0 as a pro, 6 stoppages, unanimous decision win on the Contender Series last year to earn his contract. And he gets a tough assignment in his debut because Damone Blackshear is a good wrestler, a good grappler, battled Yusuf Zalal to a draw on short notice in his debut. Now he gets a full camp. Probably the best opponent that Farid Basharat has fought to this point of his career. And so this is very similar to his brother, who came in and debuted against Trevin Jones. He's facing Cody Garbrandt, we talked about earlier. It's that initial test. It's that first set the baseline test. Javid passed, maybe not flying colors, but passed and earned a good grade. Then beat Tony Gravely, passed that very well, earned another good grade. Won earlier this year against Matois Mendonche, another good grade. Here comes baby bro now. We'll see if he can do the same things. Last one, not 100% sure actually that this fight is taking place. I haven't heard an official announcement of whether Esteban Ribovic and Loic Radzhabov are actually fighting. Ribovic was originally scheduled to compete, then lost his opponent. Not 100% sure that Radzhabov is the replacement, but I want to touch on it just in case in the next day or two this gets officially confirmed so that everybody has my thoughts. And my question is just which newcomer will shine. So Ribovic is 11-0, coming off the Contender Series win last fall. Kind of one of those guys like a bunch of these Contender Series graduates of late, where he's looked really good against middling at best competition. Radzhabov, on the other hand, is 16-4-1 overall. He's lost 2 solid competition, but he hasn't exactly beaten the best competition. And so while I appreciate that he's been in there with some good guys in the PFL and fought hard and battled hard in those fights in the PFL, it's hard to sort of really know what they bring to the table because neither of them have really faced that much top end talent and shared the cage with that many top end fighters. I would lean towards Radzhabov just in terms of he's got a few more fights. He's faced some tougher competition, as I said. But if this one happens, it should be a real eye opener on both sides. It should be an instant understanding of where each of these men fit in this weight class. And it should be a good way to kick off what to me is the best card of the year by far. It is going to take a lot to top this. It is going to take a lot to get me more excited and more, I don't even know what the right word is because it's not even like fixated, fascinated, locked in, counting down to the return of John Jones, to answering some of these questions about him, about Valentina Shevchenko, about every fighter on this main card, about a lot of the fighters on the prelims too. This is the kind of card I think we all get up for. I look forward to sitting down with Ian and Harry later in the week to talk about it on the preview show. I look forward to trying to whittle down the number of things I like just to 10 for tomorrow here on the YouTube page. I look forward to figuring out what kind of bets Ian is going to make on the picks and plays on Friday. I haven't started mine yet either. I'm sure there's going to be some numbers that I like. Got a feeling this is going to be a put out $200 worth of wagers because I like something in every fight. I'm sure it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a great time. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope we're starting to get that interest level and excitement level rising. Because by Friday, I'm going to be bouncing off these walls. And by Saturday morning, I'm just going to be a hummingbird around my house, buzzing around until this thing kicks off. I cannot wait. I appreciate you checking in. Like this post, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the Patreon. It's the start of a month. It's the best time to sign up. Full dollars worth, full money's worth for the next 30 days. SevereMMA.com/pints. Follow me on Twitter at Spencer Kyte. Follow all of the lads as well. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.